All right, AP Current English again. This is actually this video and the one before it were really from yesterday, so I'm getting caught up. Today, which is Thursday, there won't be a video for it, but there is an assignment that you'll see in Google Classroom. Okay, so I want to talk in this video about parts 2 and 3 of The Handmaid's Tale. So part 2 is called Shopping, and it's chapter 2 through 6, right? So it's a few chapters. In this part, we learn some things. We have the narrator. Again, as I said in the last video, in the show, the narrator's name is June, though in the book we never get her actual name, which I think that that suggests kind of an anonymity, that she could be anyone, that her experience is something that many people could experience, that she is an every woman kind of character. Anyway, so she's in the room that she does not want to call her room. There's some description there. We notice that all of the ways that she could harm herself have been removed from the room. We also know that it's not, so the first room that shows up, it sounds like it's her first room, but we find out later she's been in multiple rooms, so I don't really know if this is, as we open up, kind of back in time, and then we come back into the present or not. It's not exactly clear to me. But we go on. There's reference to Aunt Lydia, who's an important person in this book. And it says that on page 8, she was in love with either or, suggesting, right, she sees things in black and white. Later on, she tells the narrator that in the olden days, right, in the old times, they had the freedom to, whereas now they have the freedom from. And that's an interesting idea, the freedom to, the freedom from. We brought that up in class, and unsurprisingly, students thought about the dress code and the injustices of the dress code, the idea that young women in school, right, because young men are rarely disciplined for dress code in school, are responsible for the actions of other people, and that sort of thing. Anyway, we talked about that quite a bit. It was a lively conversation. So we find out a little bit about the stratification of people and the way that colors are used to categorize people, which if you were in that sort of place, it's very easy to tell who is who based on what they wear. And we have the handmaids, like the narrator, who wear red. We have the Marthas, who wear green, and Marthas are essentially maids, I guess. And the name Martha comes from the story of Mary and Martha in the Bible. And Jesus came to Mary and Martha's house, and Mary wanted to listen to Jesus speak, right? And Martha was like, hey, come help me. We need to, work in the kitchen and that sort of thing. And that's where she gets her name then from. So the Marthas do housework. And the Marthas at the house where our narrator lives are named Cora and Rita. And there are racial issues in this book as well. And I think given the names, Cora and Rita, neither of which are Anglo-Saxon names. And there's a part where it talks about Rita, and she has her sleeves rolled up and show her brown arms. And given the way some of the dialect that Cora and Rita use is not Anglo-Saxon, right, white Anglo-Saxon dialect, suggest, perhaps Latina, though certainly it doesn't say for sure. Anyway, we see some of the stratification here in the hierarchy. And while there's certainly a gender-based hierarchy in this book, there's also a racial hierarchy that has been that's being used against people. So we find out about that. We kind of get a sense of the loneliness of the narrator, right? She is put on a pedestal because presumably she is able to have children, and that's a national resource. But on the other hand, that makes it so that she doesn't really get to communicate, or at least not in a friendly sort of real way with anyone else. All of the conversation she has of Glenn, which is O-F, Glenn, meaning of Glenn, her commander, right, the man that she's stationed with is named Glenn. There's also a reference to of Wayne and of Warren, right? So that means that the commander there is Wayne and Warren. Eventually we'll find out that this narrator's name, at least the name that she's referred to, is of Fred or Offred, of Fred. Her commander then, the commander that we'll meet later in the book, is named Fred. Anyway, so the conversations she has in this part with Glenn are very scripted, right? They're only allowed to say certain things. Otherwise, they might be in trouble, and thought of as, not being true believers, and they could be reported. Not unlike 1984, if you've read that. There's reference to unwomen. Right? These are people who go to the colonies. They're called unwomen, and we'll talk about it more later, but if you call someone an unwoman, right, you're defining what a woman is, because these people are not women then if they're unwomen. And it's an interesting idea, and I encourage you to think about, okay, who are the ones who are doing the defining? Who are the ones who have that power over the language? And we'll see that there are some ties to men and language in this book. One of the places that happens is on page 11, and we're told about Luke, who is the narrator's, we'll see later, the narrator's husband in the olden days. And it says, fraternize means to behave like a brother. Luke told me that. He said there was no corresponding word that meant to behave like a sister. Sororize, it would have to be, he said, from the Latin. He liked knowing about such details, the derivations of words, curious usages, right? And so there's this idea then, we'll see kind of the ownership of language, and Latin comes up again later. All right, let's see, chapter 3, we get the introduction of the wife, the commander's wife, so the narrator then goes and meets her for the first time, where we hear the story of that, and certainly there's the idea that it's not an easy situation for her either, right? Because the purpose of the handmaid is to copulate with the commander and have a child. And so the wife then presumably is unable to have a child, and also is giving up her husband to the handmaid. So it's certainly problematic all the way around, and consequently, they don't seem to get along. But there are little clues that kind of come that maybe there's ways to get power, right? So the commander's wife, whom we find out is named Serena Joy later, smokes, right? And so she's able to get cigarettes, right? So there are things that are forbidden that people are still getting, so maybe there's something there. We have the possibility for it. Later on in the chapter, at the end of the chapter, the narrator kind of remembers where she's seen this woman before, right? And that's where she brings up the name Serena Joy, which is it's an ironic name. She's neither serene nor is she joyous. But she remembers watching her on TV. And as we'll see later, the character Serena Joy is kind of the combination of two real-life people. One is Tammy Faye Baker, who at the time of this book, when it was written, was a gospel singer. Her husband, Jimmy Baker, was a televangelist. He was later sent to prison for embezzling lots of money from people, and she divorced him. And then also ironically became kind of an icon in the gay community, but that was long before this book was written. Anyway, she's famous for singing and crying while she sings and that sort of thing. The other person she's kind of based on is Phyllis Schlafly, who was a lawyer in the 70s. She worked really hard against the Equal Rights Amendment, and she really fought against that. Very conservative woman. Anyway, Serena Joy is kind of a combination of both. All right, chapter 4, which is a short one. We hear a little bit more and get an idea of what the world is like here. There are lots of checkpoints and barriers. Women have been shot because the guardians and the guards of those can be kind of jumpy. I think one of the most important things, well, I don't know the most important things. One of those things that jumps out to me is on 21, Rita says, "No such thing," said Rita. "Everything is meant," right? And so, when it says that in a book, I think that's a clue, right? Everything is meant. Everything means something. But we see how the narrator thinks about these men and her ability to maybe gain some power and what she has to trade and what she can get stuff done with. But of course nothing really happens there. All right, chapter 5 then. We have a lot of the walking into town and shopping, and we get a little bit more of what's going on. We find out, right, that they're in the Republic of Gilead, in the heart of it, and they're in Cambridge, Massachusetts is where they are, and you can tell by some of the references. But that's the heart of Gilead, which we should remember is also like where the Puritans came. And so this new society, then this new group, we could describe as kind of neo-puritanical sect of something, right? So neo-Puritans. And it's taking place there. There happens to be a college in Cambridge, Harvard, founded by Puritans, and that's certainly important as well. We see definitions or descriptions of what people wear. We see the Econo wives, right? And so a Econo wife is a wife who has to fulfill all of the duties that happen in the wealthy homes, right? Be the wife, the handmaid, and the Martha, all three of them. And it's here that there's a reference to where Aunt Lydia says, this is page 24, this is an important quote, I think. "There's more than one kind of freedom," said Aunt Lydia. "Freedom to and freedom from. In the days of anarchy, it was freedom to. Now you are being given freedom from. Don't underrate it." And this is after the narrator talks about how, in the olden days, sorry about that, it wasn't always safe to be a woman, right? That being a woman meant often feeling watched, feeling things were unsafe, right? If a police officer comes to your door, make him slide the ID underneath. Don't go to laundromats at night. Don't run at night. When you go outside, put your keys through your thumbs, or through your fingers. Make sure you always have your pepper spray ready, right? And these are things that, of course, women all experience now as well, or have to deal with now. There's reference to the wars that are going on, and that tells us then that this is a kind of a specific religious sect here. This is not this book is not a damnation of Christianity, but certainly a damnation of people who use Christianity to do awful things to people. But there's reference to the Baptists, the Libertheos, which is people who would have followed liberation theology, which comes out of Brazil. Yeah, so we see someone who is pregnant. This is of Warren. And they do a lot of walking, right? And they walk around, but everything they say is really kind of scripted. And so the narrator kind of doesn't know what to think of Glenn. Is she a true believer, or is she afraid? Much like the narrator is. Okay. I know I'm going through this kind of fast, but this video is already really long. Okay, and then finally, part 3, which is short. There's a memory in here, and it's a memory that I think is important because it tells us a little bit about what the satire is criticizing. And on one hand, the religious right, the very paternalistic, patriarchal religious right, is obviously being satirized, but we get another part here, and that's this, there's the memory of, as a child, going to a park where they're burning pornography. And this is with her mother, and we'll find out more about her mother later, but she was a feminist, and this is kind of second wave feminism. And they're going there to burn pornography because they feel it's exploitive and oppressive and objectifying. And while that's what her mother thinks, the narrator, being a young girl, talks about it. I threw the magazine into the flames. It's on page 39, by the way. It riffled open in the wind of its burning. Big flakes of paper came loose, sailed into the air, still on fire, parts of women's bodies turning to black ash in the air before my eyes. So what is it that she remembers? The image is not the destruction of exploitive materials. The image is the burning of women's bodies. And so kind of the idea that maybe that kind of feminism also had something to play with this, play into this. Think about, when is it that feminism and the religious right agree? And perhaps at least in the 70s and 80s, they did agree on some things. And isn't that problematic? And we'll see how those two kind of combine. And then very lastly, it talks about the idea, it talks a little bit about the format that this is taking, right? I would like to believe this is a story I'm telling. I need to believe it. I must believe it. If it's a story I'm telling, then I have control over the ending. Then there will be an ending to the story. The real life will come after it, if I can pick up where I left off. It isn't a story I'm telling. It's also a story I'm telling in my head as I go along. Tell rather than write, because I have nothing to write with, and writing in any case is forbidden. But if it's a story, even in my head, I must be telling it to someone. You don't tell a story to yourself. There's always someone else, right? And these are the ideas. You can mean thousands. I'm not in any immediate danger, I'll say to you. I'll pretend you can hear me, but it's no good because I know you can't. It just kind of brings up these ideas of how she's telling a story, and the doing the best possible way to tell the truth of it, and also that it's all language is communication to other people, and this is something that she in her current situation doesn't really have, but it's a desire to speak out to other people. Okay, that's it for today. I apologize this is so long. I'll do my best to make them shorter later. See ya.